My name is Cohen Miles-Rath. I am a author, speaker, and mental health advocate.
Can you tell me about your own mental health journey?
Yeah, so great question, Mike. So I cannot discuss my mental health story without, going as far back as my childhood. I grew up in a small rural western town in New York, and I had a very interesting childhood where my parents were separated, and I would live in between my mom's and my dad's houses, which looked very different. On my mom's side, I had five siblings. It was chaotic. On my dad's side, I was an only child, and I kind of grew up between, and we all lived in like relatively low income poverty, so there was some ACEs here, adverse childhood experiences. And it wasn't until probably my middle school years when I really found what I wanted to do in life, which I happened to be really talented in distance running. So I just I had so much success in distance running that I would end up being an all-American in high school and then become a like first generation college student, right? College was not on my radar. Flash forward, when I get to college, I put so much pressure on my need to succeed in sports that when I didn't achieve what I wanted to, everything just kind of fell apart, right? I was not able to handle my unwellness, these mental health challenges that I was facing because I had set the standard so high and it felt like the only way out, my only way forward, right? So that is kind of where my journey began because after I failed in my sport, at least what I interpreted as failure, I began to misuse substances. I began to party nonstop. And then at some point within it, right before graduating college, is when I started to face signs and symptoms of mental illness. And they never were treated effectively. I had no understanding of mental illness at this time. No one around me approached me to discuss and I was behaving bizarre, and I was facing, simultaneous, uh, you know, mania and psychosis, and it got to the point where I believed that I discovered the truth in everything. I believed that the universe was sending me signs, and this was all like right before the semester I was supposed to graduate. Now, unfortunately, because of I'd been in and out of the hospital. I forgot to mention that I'd been in and out of the hospital a couple times, but because my signs and symptoms weren't being effectively treated, they got worse up until the point where an incident happened where I'd attacked my dad because I believed the devil was inside him. It was part of this like psychosis story that I was telling myself, well, that was happening inside my mind. And I wound up in jail after that. And I faced like severe psychosis in solitary confinement, which was such a difficult experience, and it is a difficult experience to describe. But fortunately, I came back. Fortunately, my dad was alive, right? All these things happened, and when I came back to reality in jail, I just kind of made this complete 180, 360. I started to embrace treatment. I finally accepted my mental illness. And ever since then, this was probably about 8 years ago, I've dedicated my life to not only my own mental health, journey, but also sharing my story to help others, going to get my master's in social work, and have been working in the mental health advocacy field for more than 5 years.
With your story, what is it like getting it out to the public?
Yeah, so going back to when I faced the incident with my dad, and this was in 2016, after during my worst mental health crisis. There were news stories published about me. Some of the titles of these local news was "Man bites his father's ear off," Cohocton man attacks his father, right? So I was already in the public because of my crisis. It was all put on the display, although no one knew it was a mental health crisis because it was just sensationalized, right? So I've already been in the public with my story, but now this is an opportunity for me to share my story from my perspective. So what it's been like so far is it's been very empowering, very supportive, and I'm so but it's also been challenging. I because my story is it's very sensitive and it's very hard for people to understand certain things that I might describe, but I have a mission with it and I have a vision and I'm just so empowered to be able to do that and to come to platforms like this and share it.
And you have a book coming out. Can you tell me about that?
Yep. So after my crisis, I got out of jail and I began to pursue a master's degree in social work, where I started to really gain mental health expertise. Right, I started to learn about mental health from the clinical standpoint. I initially wanted to pursue substance use counseling or therapy, but I ended up wanting to be more of a macro social worker and look more at like our systems and our communities. So after my master's degree, I got a field. I got a job in mental health advocacy at a small nonprofit in New York State, and that's when I began to write my memoir. So as I grew in my career, I was writing my story simultaneously, and I really tried to intertwine my mental health expertise alongside my story, so that a way I can, examine the things that I went through and be like, hey, what if this happened? What if my trip to the hospital was less chaotic? Would I have trusted the system more? I, what if my family had approached me when I was, believing in bizarre things and saying bizarre things, right? And asked about my mental health, right? That could have made a difference. So to pull it all together, I have really tried to make my book and my memoir not just about my own personal experience, but have a strong voice associated with it and give real life examples as to what could be different.
Yeah, how does it feel for you when you talk to people with similar lived experience?
I have given my storytelling presentation to several organizations, and there's always someone who comes up to me afterward to share their story to me, which which is it's an amazing experience, and I'm so grateful to create a space where people feel comfortable doing that with me, and and it's a wide range, right? Since I've pulled back from my story to examine it through the wellness continuum, unwellness, mental health challenges, and then I also, get to the more severe side of illness. But since I do that, I mean, I get a wide range of people sharing me their stories, and I think it's just, I think based on their responses, they feel empowered. They want to share their story, and I'm just so, I feel like it's amazing and needed. More people need to hear these inspirational stories so that they know that recovery and managing mental health, whether you're going through a challenge or an illness, support and recovery is possible, but it's more probable in the right circumstances. And we could do a lot better in helping people have those circumstances where support is more likely.
And you're going out there as a public speaker, and that makes me nervous just talking about it. What is it like to go out there and share your not only story, but mission and everything?
Well, with practice comes, more improved skills. So when I started out, I started public speaking, a few years ago, sharing my story at some press conferences at the New York State Capitol, taking any opportunity to speak at an event. And At first it was really challenging, but I think I've definitely have gotten a lot more comfortable with it, right? And I think what has been most difficult about my public speaking is my content, because my content can be very heavy, it could be dark, but I really try to make it compelling so that people are drawn in, while also, bringing out the hopeful aspect of my story. And I think just overall, when I'm up on that stage, telling my story and seeing people's eyes light up or mouths drop, I get these responses that just, I know people are listening to me, and that motivates me, and that motivates me to to make my voice louder, and it's an incredible experience. I love it.
How has helping others helped your own healing process?
Great question. I would say that when uh when I've been able to help people with their mental health challenges or certain symptoms that they may be experiencing of mental illness, I think there's just this complete open conversation that makes talking about these issues and talking about these difficult situations so much easier. Like there's absolutely no stigma or shame. That wall is completely broken when I have these open conversations with people, and I think that's just. I mean, I've dealt with so much shame and stigma from my experience. That's been one of the biggest challenges of my own experience. So knowing that when I discuss my difficult story, people are like, "Oh, hey, I understand now. I hear you, and now I want to share mine." And hear me. It just it eliminates that wall that I felt for so long, and that's where I believe a lot of that recovery and support journey starts. Is I think of a specific example and this was years after jail, when I had began to experience another severe mental illness, severe signs and symptoms. I was bridging that crisis point where I could feel myself like, and this was at like 1 o'clock in the morning. I was like having racing thoughts, and I was starting to experience some bizarre thinking, but I was aware of it, right? I had trained for this moment, but I remember at 1 o'clock in the morning, I was ready to go to the hospital because that's how unwell I felt. But I didn't, because I wanted to call my dad. I wanted to wake up my dad. I wanted to call my best friend, but I couldn't do that because I felt like they would panic. I felt like there was a shame and stigma there that prevented me from doing that, right? So instead, I handled it on my own, and fortunately, I was able to make it through that night and then get help the next morning. But point is, stigma and shame controlled me more than my diagnosis at that time in the night. And so when we could break that down, that's where I believe that recovery and management of mental health really starts to begin.
What do you do to help your own mental health?
That is a great question, and it's definitely been years and years of practice. Uh, After I had gotten out of jail, after accepting mental, I had to accept it, my what had happened. Right? I had to confront my dark past with psychosis, the incident with my dad, and I had to. Acceptance was the first thing, right? And then I had to. I started embracing treatment, therapy. Um, I had started to take medication, which helped to alleviate some of those symptoms. And during that time, though, I was constantly paying attention to my mental health. And then I kind of I've done that ever since. For the past 8 years, I'm always in tune with what might be causing me stress. Anytime I do experience signs or symptoms Mainly depersonalization, mainly derealization. Sometimes it's ideas of reference. Putting, I don't latch onto the label of my diagnosis, which is schizoaffective. I was diagnosed back, in grad school with this diagnosis. But I don't latch on to that in the context of like I see it as something that helps me manage my mental health, right? I don't need to have the label of being, sometimes I feel like these labels might, um, you know, make me think like, oh, it's not possible to manage that, right? Or it just becomes an all or nothing situation. But really, I feel like mental illness can be dynamic and fluctuate throughout someone's life. For me, it's more important to pay attention to the specific symptoms and that I face, and having words to explain what those symptoms are, like depersonalization, derealization. They help me to be better prepared to manage them as they occur. And they have, but the more practice that I've done managing them, the easier it has gotten over time. So that's something I just continue doing.
What would you say to anyone going through a tough time?
I think I would say, you know, one of the first steps in going in facing something like that is to be self-aware of it, right? Have that recognition, have that awareness, and then, you know, be prepared. Well, if they're going through it at the time, think of what they can do to manage it, right? And I always, when I was going through starting my recovery journey, I leaned into my family, my support system, uh, my professional treatment. I leaned into those things to help me guide me through that process. And that was a very important part of all of it. So I think there's this internal aspect to dealing with a difficult situation, and then the external, where you're going to someone or someone's coming to you looking to help you because they recognize that you might be going through something difficult, and then you accepting that support. You know, that's where I would really lean into is that internal and external way of managing your situation is can really help to get through it.
Where do you want to see your mission in the next 3 to 5 years?
I would like to, honestly, I'd like to publish another book, probably in 3 to 5 years. My first one took me 5 years to write, so if I start now,
There you go.
I might be able to be prepared to do that. But I mean, I like to continue my professional career. Right now, I'm working at the Suicide Prevention Center for New York State. So I'm been making moves in my career with mental health. So I'd like to continue that, but I'd also like to just expand my opportunities to share my story and to speak at organizations and to connect with other leaders to collaborate on ways that we could expand this work, right? One thing that I could think of is, New York State was the first state to pass a mental health education law back in 2016. And I see no reason why other states can't pass a similar law that would require mental health education in K through 12 schools. So I could see myself going that route where I'm advocating for mental health education in every school throughout the country, right? I would love to see that because I believe how impactful that could be. So I'm still figuring it out as I go, but I do know that I just want to do more.
How can people reach out and learn more?
Yeah, so anyone could visit my website, cohenmilesrath.com, and there's a contact page on my website where you can submit a contact form that goes directly to my email. You could ask me anything, ask me about my story, ask me about my professional advocacy insights. Or, I'm always looking for opportunities to speak to, so they could always reach out to me through that form, and I'll get back to you.